let's think about the intensity of exercise and fitness training, I suppose. And I just want to kind of give you a reminder, really. I think it's a reminder for most of you, at least, depending on what you've studied so far. The reminder in terms of exercise intensity, what is it? We kind of sort of know what we mean by injury, don't we? You know, something's not working properly, something's a bit broken. But what do we mean by exercise intensity? Well, it always, folks, comes from FID. It comes from frequency. It comes from intensity. It comes from duration. Okay, so these are, when I talk about increased intensity, in this case, this is what we're referring to. Now, being puritanical about it, when we talk about FID, we are specifically interested in intensity here. Yes, duration can get longer. Yes, we can train more regularly. And I'll come back to that, but I want to just remind you how we measure intensity. And these are the only ways before we get into this. So if we're doing any kind of resistance training base, we can measure intensity by the percentage of 1 repetition max. This is especially for strength gains. This is especially for power. When we are training, let's say in the gym and we're lifting weights, we want to know what our repetition max, our max lift is, and once, and then work at a certain proportion, percentage of that maximum. Secondly, when we are talking about sort of long duration lifting, such as, you know, maybe trying to increase muscular endurance, we would measure the 15 repetition max. What is the maximum someone can lift 15 times? And then we can train people as a percentage of that figure. A classic form of intensity that is used very commonly is for more continuous fartlek interval type experiences, where we say it's the percentage of heart rate max. Remember, as a very broad rule, there's a better calculation of this. Maximum heart rate is 220 minus one's age. And if we look at a percentage of heart rate max, we might find, for example, that aerobic performers, they would be looked to be between 65 and 80 or even 85% of their maximum heart range. And then finally, folks, if I just grab an orange here, the other type of intensity we want to be aware of is the percentage of the range of movement that the person undergoes. So this is obviously more for flexibility type training, but this is the only way we can change the intensity of training. There might be some more technical ways with regard to more advanced training methodologies, but we cannot increase intensity by training more frequently, and we cannot make it more intense by doing it longer. They are just increases of length and frequency. They're different, but this is what we mean so scientifically by intensity. So what we're going to say here is I want to reapply a rule to you guys, and it's something that we've covered when we did the principles of training lesson, and it's the following: exercise intensity must progress gradually and steadily. Why? To avoid injury. If we go to the gym and try and do too much, too heavy, too fast, too high a percentage, we work, at a heart rate max that we are not prepared for, we are going to experience injury. Sooner or later, that is going to happen. So I want to remind you, this is what we refer to as progressive overload. Yes, we are putting strain on the body, but we apply that principle of progressive, not just overload, but progressive overload in order to do that. Now, let's move this on to the actual sort of meat of the actual session. This is the assumption, right? We are assuming, I think you're expecting me to say the following, right, with regard to exercise intensity and injury. I think you're expecting me to say that the higher the intensity, the higher the risk of injury. That's what you think I'm going to say, right? Risk of injury. You probably also think I'm going to say the following, that the lower the intensity, the lower the risk of injury. That would seem to be like a common sense, obvious, general knowledge sort of perspective on this. But there are other considerations to make. But this may not be, isn't reliable. We want to take this further and go dub. What is the actual story here? Well, the but tells us the following. The medical research tells us that flexibility flexibility is arguably the most important factor to whether someone is going to experience certainly acute injuries, muscle damage, soft tissue injuries. Flexibility, the medical literature states that flexibility is the precursor before this assumption as to whether injuries are likely to occur. Now, that could also come from things like poor technique, couldn't it? Things like that. But there's more. We also have the following, and it's this. If someone does the following, if someone increases intensity, let's say, I don't know, percentage 1 repetition max, and they increase frequency, if someone does this, increases both these things, this would be considered overtraining, okay? Not following the principle of progressive overload. In this scenario, we would suggest more likely that there's going to be injury. So this is like, going back to what I said before, this is like increasing this, and meanwhile we do this more often. So we're increasing this and this. This is not good practice. We need to do these separately. Otherwise, why? Because injury is more likely to occur in that situation. Furthermore, if we take the medical literature in its entirety, I want you to look at the statement here, is that there is little association. There's probably not a link between intensity and injury. Intensity and injury. So the medical literature says that yes, you can work hard. The human body's designed for that or developed for that. There's probably not a problem with that as long as we follow the correct protocols to go about achieving those things. And the other thing is a point I've almost made, and I'm going to sort of double down on. If we do the following situation, if we increase intensity, let's say we run in continuous training at a greater percentage of heart rate max, so we increase intensity and we increase duration. Let's say we go for extra minutes, or we increase our percentage 1 repetition max and then do more reps or more sets. This is where we are going to have issues, okay? This again is going to be overtraining. And this overtraining here and here are where problems and injuries become more likely. So one of the big takeaways here is that, well, two massive takeaways. Flexibility is the precursor or not of the higher tendency for injury. And obviously, therefore, someone who's working at really high intensities needs to make sure that their flexibility is maintained, especially if they're a strength performer. But the other thing is when we take our intensity and up it and then combine it with doing it more often or doing it for longer, more time, more sets, more reps, less recovery time, this is where intensity and injury are likely to coincide. And I just want to bring you back to my base principle. Remind yourselves how we increase intensity. We do it in those ways specifically. And we're saying if we do any of those and then add this and or this is perhaps where injury is more likely to occur. So I encourage you to get back to your training program design and see what sort of considerations you've made based on what I've just described to you. Cheers.